Seattle wore its usual gray that day, a damp cloak of drizzle and fog hugging the skyline like a secret too heavy to confess. But beneath the veil of coffee shops and tech towers, something darker pulsed through the streets, the kind of menace that didn't blink when blood was spilled. It began without fanfare. Two men, faces cloaked, hearts ice cold, walked into a downtown bank like they owned the place. One held a shotgun with the ease of a man who'd used it before. The other carried the kind of eyes that didn't just see you, they assessed you, calculated your worth in dollars and danger. No alarms, no hostages, not yet. Just a few words, barked like thunder. I'm not here for games. Move fast. Fill the bag. Or I'll make you regret breathing. The teller, hands trembling like autumn leaves, obeyed without a whimper. And just like that, they vanished, $150,000 richer and one step deeper into a game that only ends one of two ways, with a prison sentence or a body bag. That robbery wasn't just a crime, it was a signal. A calling card left in the silence after the chaos. Within days, whispers reached the Seattle FBI field office. And when those whispers turned to gunfire, it became a case that would grip the bureau like a vice. See, Seattle isn't new to bank heists. It's the reluctant capital of them. No city in the U.S. sees more. The FBI's robbery division, led by Special Agent Mike Adams, had grown accustomed to paper trails and silent notes slid across counters. But this was something else. Something feral. Something willing to draw blood. And Agent Adams? He'd seen blood before. He knew that when criminals got away clean, they didn't retreat. They evolved. They grew bold. And bold men make mistakes, the kind the Bureau lives to catch. It took a week for the next storm to hit. Same city, same cold precision, but this time, the weapons were bigger. Louder. The criminals shoved customers aside like furniture, shouted commands like military officers on edge. Confidence was swelling in their veins, and the FBI took notice. Same crew, Adams muttered to his team, flipping through reports in the Bureau's war room. And they're only just warming up. Then came a third job. Even more brazen. Even more violent. A pattern was forming, the kind of pattern that only trained agents could see for what it was, a blueprint for destruction. 3 strikes in under a month. No fingerprints. No clean facial ID. No witnesses willing to swear to more than silhouettes and shadows. But the violence? That left a trace. Agent Adams knew this wasn't luck. It was discipline. Planning. And when he said it was professional, he meant military, or worse, ex-military gone rogue. Maybe something darker still. But the clock was ticking, and the streets were watching. The Bureau moved in quietly, surveillance widened, resources were funneled, databases combed for patterns in stolen vehicles, tactical approaches, weapon types. Every move from now on would be surgical. Because in the Bureau's line of work, patterns mean leverage. And leverage means arrests. The FBI wasn't just looking for robbers. They were hunting predators. May 17, 2000, a date that would be burned into Seattle's collective memory like a scar that refused to fade. It began like any other afternoon, drizzle on windshields, coffee in hand, and the hum of everyday life. But by sundown, sirens would scream, and the city would stagger from a fresh wound. Downtown, a pair of masked figures burst through the front doors of a busy bank, brandishing weapons with cold intent. There was no subtlety now, no whispered threats. Just raw menace echoing off marble floors. Nobody move. You know the drill. They weren't bluffing. These men weren't here to negotiate. They were here to take, and they took plenty. But what stood out this time wasn't just the size of the haul. It was the pacing, the choreography. One controlled the room, barking orders with a soldier's cadence. The other scanned for the vault, his movements precise, practiced. Calculated chaos. Within minutes, they disappeared again, ghosts in a city that suddenly felt haunted. By now, the FBI was on edge. Special Agent Adams called in tactical analysts. Patterns were confirmed, same weapons, same MO, same ghosts. But the ghosts were getting reckless. 2 weeks later, the robbers struck again. This time on Aurora Avenue, at a branch of Wells Fargo. Only this time, they weren't alone. Inside, the bank bustled with civilians, mothers with strollers, retirees cashing checks, office clerks on lunch break. The robbers stormed the lobby like it was a battlefield. Get on the ground. Down. Now. No hesitation. No mercy. One held the room while the other hunted for the manager, demanding access to the vault with a gun pressed so tightly against the man's shoulder, the bruise would outlive the memory. But outside, the world was already shifting. A silent alarm had been tripped. Seattle PD scrambled units. But the FBI was already listening, monitoring frequencies, cross-referencing timelines, watching everything unfold in real time from their field ops center. Officer Wesley Buxton, a veteran with nerves of iron, was among the first to respond. He arrived seconds before the storm hit its peak. He clocked the details: the getaway motorcycle idle on the sidewalk, the tension crackling like a wire pulled too tight. Then, the front doors flew open. The robbers emerged fast, focused, unaware that law enforcement had boxed them in. They reached for the bike. It refused to start. That's when the world stopped breathing. Hands in the air, someone shouted. But panic had already ignited the fuse. One man dropped low, tumbling hard onto the concrete. Buxton moved in, weapon drawn, heart pounding. He aimed, shouted commands, adrenaline pushing through the fog of decision. But the second suspect? He ran. And when he ran, he fired. Gunshots exploded in the late afternoon haze. Buxton staggered, hit, his world shattering into blurred sound and broken light. Other officers returned fire. One of the robbers collapsed, riddled with bullets. But the other? Gone. Slipped between seconds like a shadow born from smoke. "Officer down," came the desperate voice over the radio. "We need backup. Now." FBI field agents hit the scene within minutes. Adams himself surveyed the aftermath. One suspect dead. One wounded officer. And one fugitive now loose in a city growing more frightened by the hour. This wasn't just another heist, Adams whispered to himself. This was a war gone sideways. The man who fled was more than just a thief now. He was a fugitive with blood on his hands. And he had no intention of going quietly. By nightfall, Seattle had transformed. Helicopters circled the skyline like vultures. Squad cars carved through traffic, their lights painting red and blue specters across damp pavement. Officers combed alleyways and abandoned lots, every shadow now suspect, every whisper a potential lead. And at the eye of the storm, the FBI. Special Agent Mike Adams convened an emergency task force at the Bureau's field office. Maps were unfurled. Surveillance footage reviewed. Crime scene photos pinned under fluorescent lights. Every agent in the room understood, they weren't hunting a man anymore. They were hunting a wounded predator. The fugitive, identity still unknown, had melted into the city like steam into fog. But he hadn't gone far. Hours after the shootout, a call came in from a property manager near the bank. She'd found something. Blood, fresh, dark, and deliberate, streaking the hallway outside her apartment units. "I went up to check a broken light fixture," she told officers. And there it was. Like someone had dragged themselves inside. Within the hour, a SWAT team arrived. They breached the building, unit by unit, weapons drawn, breath held. The FBI's forensic team followed behind, gathering samples, swabbing surfaces, collecting the residue of a man unraveling. But when the final door opened, there was nothing but silence. The blood was real. The trail was clear. But the suspect? Gone again. Outside, agents debriefed. Adams listened, stone-faced. He knew what it meant: the fugitive was injured, desperate, and still mobile. That made him volatile. Unpredictable. Dangerous. And it meant he was running out of time. A few hours later, another tip surfaced. A man had tried to hijack a car just a few blocks from the previous sighting. The driver, a middle-aged local, recalled a disheveled stranger, bruised, frantic, wild-eyed, who banged on his hood and reached for the ignition. He looked like he'd been through hell, the man told authorities. I thought he needed help, until he grabbed for my keys. The suspect was fast, animal fast, but the driver had fought him off. Sped away. Gave a perfect description. The Bureau's analysts cross-checked the statement with earlier reports. Everything matched. This was their man. He's wounded, Adams told his team, eyes scanning the growing list of sightings. And wounded men make bad choices. By now, the FBI had taken lead on the case. Local PD deferred to their strategy, a sweeping net of informants, digital surveillance, and boots-on-the-ground canvassing. Then, the city held its breath again. A 911 call from a residential suburb shattered the brief calm. A couple mid-40s, quiet neighborhood, typical Tuesday, had been held hostage in their own home. The wife had seen the man first. He was standing in their driveway, inside her truck. "Get out of my car," she'd shouted. He played it cool at first. Claimed he'd been in a fight. Said he needed help. But when a police chopper rumbled low overhead, his eyes flicked skyward and something inside him snapped. He drew a knife. "You're gonna let me in that house," he growled. She resisted, but he was too strong. He forced her through the doorway just as her husband came home. "Honey," the man called. "What's going on?" What followed was chaos, a scuffle, a threat, a brutal warning. "Move, and I'll end it right here." For nearly 3 hours, the fugitive holed up inside their home, drinking beer from their fridge, watching his own manhunt unfold on the television. The couple sat frozen, trapped in their living room with a man who had already shot a cop and had nothing left to lose. Then a knock at the window. A patrol unit. A flash of movement. He bolted. By the time agents and officers arrived, he had vanished again. But not without leaving a mark and a trail. One more thread for the FBI to pull. With every hour the fugitive remained loose, the city grew more restless and the FBI more determined. Inside the Bureau's Seattle headquarters, the caseboard had transformed into a dense web of names, photos, and timelines. Red string connected crime scenes to aliases. Blood evidence to DNA labs. Phone numbers to burner accounts. And right in the center of it all, a question no one had answered. Who was this man they were chasing? Then came the crack in the case. During the brief hostage ordeal, the suspect had made a phone call. Just one. Short. Urgent. But enough to leave a digital fingerprint. FBI tech agents triangulated the signal, traced the number, and uncovered a name, one that sent a chill through the task force. Aristotle March. To the public, Marr was just a local businessman. Owner of a towing company. Quiet. Unassuming. The kind of guy who paid in cash and kept his head down. But the FBI's files told a different story. Beneath the surface, Aristotle Marr was a spider, the mastermind of a sprawling web of criminal operations. Stolen goods. Weapons caches. Money laundering schemes that reached from the Pacific Northwest to the sun-bleached docks of Jamaica. And now, with one phone call, Marr had stepped out of the shadows. He's not just helping the suspect, Adams told his team. He's running him. The revelation reframed the entire case. This wasn't a lone criminal on a spree. It was a coordinated operation, and Marr was the architect. Agents raided his home within hours. They moved fast, precise, a signature bureau maneuver. What they found inside would confirm every suspicion. Stacks of fake IDs. Stolen merchandise. Firearms traced to cold cases. And tucked inside a bedroom drawer, one-way plane tickets. Destination, Kingston, Jamaica. He was ready to disappear, one agent noted, flipping through the tickets. And take his secrets with him. But Marr wasn't there. He'd already vanished. Like a phantom who knew the rules of pursuit. The Bureau widened its net. Customs and Border Patrol were alerted. Embassies informed. Marr had resources and friends in dark corners. But the FBI had reach. Global. Relentless. Then came the intel they'd been waiting for. A longtime informant, buried deep in Seattle's criminal underground, came forward. He confirmed what the Bureau had suspected: Marr wasn't just financing the robberies, he'd orchestrated them. Provided vehicles. Chose the targets. Supplied the weapons. And the man the FBI had been chasing? He wasn't acting alone. He was Marr's muscle. His enforcer. His ghost with a gun. By this point, local law enforcement stepped back entirely. The case had become federal in every sense. FBI field teams coordinated with the U.S. Marshals. Warrant squads were deployed. The Bureau's international division opened communication lines with Jamaican authorities. "We lose him now," Adams warned, "and we don't get a second shot." The game had changed. The fugitive wasn't just running anymore. He had help. He had a plan. And he had 1 foot out of the country. But the Bureau had something else. Momentum. By now, Aristotle Marr had become more myth than man. The news ran his name in whispers. To the public, he was a missing businessman. But to the FBI, he was something far more dangerous: a mastermind with enough cash, cover, and cunning to vanish without a ripple. But the Bureau doesn't chase ghosts. They chase patterns. Behavior. Mistakes. And Marr had just made his first. The tickets found in his home weren't just clues, they were timelines. A trail of digital breadcrumbs the FBI could follow. He wasn't hiding in the shadows anymore, he was trying to outrun them. His escape, the Bureau believed, had already begun. Back in Seattle, Agent Mike Adams shifted gears. Surveillance turned to coordination. The FBI's legal attaché in Kingston received a priority dispatch. Within hours, the Bureau was working hand-in-hand with Jamaican authorities. "We've got a name," Adams told his field team. "We've got a passport alias. And we've got a country. Now we make it small for him." The Bureau's international division, quiet and surgical, began squeezing Marr's resources. Bank accounts were flagged. Wire transfers traced. Friends turned nervous. Safe houses went cold. For 7 long months, Marr danced through the Caribbean, slipping through islands, trading identities, moving just fast enough to stay ahead. But not forever. As the heat intensified, informants began to speak. Whispers reached back to Seattle: sightings, rumors, transactions made in panic. Marr's network was crumbling. His wealth couldn't buy him silence anymore. "Pressure breaks steel," Adams said, watching the board fill with intel. "And Marr is made of rust." Then, on a rainy morning in February, the improbable happened. Marr came home. No arrest. No confrontation. He simply walked into the Seattle courthouse with his lawyer at his side, wearing a tailored jacket and the kind of expression reserved for men who think they've already won. "Gentlemen," he said to the officers waiting. "Shall we begin?" But confidence is not immunity. Behind the calm exterior was a man running out of moves. The FBI had built a wall of evidence so airtight it could suffocate. DNA samples recovered from the blood at the crime scene matched Marr exactly. Surveillance records from the hostage house confirmed his presence. The stolen motorcycle was traced to a property under his control. And the phone call? Time-stamped. Logged. Irrefutable. Witnesses lined up. Forensic teams stood ready. And the Bureau's case file was thick enough to tip scales. Faced with reality, even Aristotle Marr, the man who once pulled strings from the shadows, folded. He pled guilty on all counts. Bank robbery. Attempted murder of a law enforcement officer. Hostage taking. Weapons charges. Conspiracy. Each word landed like a nail in a coffin. And the sentence? 23 years in federal prison. No early release. No second chances. The courtroom was quiet the day the sentence came down, not silent, but hushed. The kind of hush reserved for moments when justice catches up with chaos. Aristotle Marr, once a phantom behind the curtain, stood before the judge without his shadow armor. The sentence was clear. Final. 23 years in a federal facility, far from his empire of back alleys and fake names. There would be no applause. No triumphant headlines. Just the slow turn of a chapter closing, the kind that leaves a scar on the city and a lesson in the casebooks of the Bureau. For the FBI, this wasn't just a win. It was a testament. From the first silent alarm to the final gavel strike, it was their tireless precision, their relentless pursuit, that turned a tangled crime spree into a clear line of accountability. The surveillance work, the behavioral profiling, the coordinated international efforts, this was the Bureau at its most focused. Special Agent Mike Adams stood on the courthouse steps that evening, his coat collar turned against the wind. He didn't speak to the cameras. Didn't take credit. He just watched the sky turn to dusk and let the silence speak for itself. One man was behind bars. But the story wasn't about one man. It was about a city, about the fear that crept into its veins, and the agents who walked through smoke and shell casings to pull it back from the brink. Officer Wesley Buxton, the man who had bled on the pavement months before, was there too. Alive. He'd recovered. Slowly. Scars still lined his shoulder, reminders of the bullet and the man who fired it. He sat in the back of the courtroom during sentencing. Never said a word. Just nodded, once, when the judge read the time. "I'd have liked him to get more," he said later. "But 23 years is 23 years. And he won't be hurting anyone else in that time. Seattle still sees robberies. Still carries its burdens. But one less predator walks its streets. And in the end, the city didn't owe its peace to luck or mercy. It owed it to method. To men and women in dark suits, tracing threads in silence, until the truth had nowhere left to hide. Because justice, real justice, doesn't always come with flashing lights. Sometimes, it walks softly. But it never stops walking.